Ooh. I'm not going to be able to watch this movie the same way again. Alright, so something was kind of brought to my attention thanks to good old Mike Drucker, who was a comedy writer for IGN, and now he's a writer for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I don't know how he managed to downgrade, but that's just my personal opinion. And I follow the guy on Twitter. He brought up a very interesting point, and you can go and check it out on his Twitter, but just be wary. He is rather vague about it. I'm actually about to be rather spoilery with Solo, a Star Wars story, and a particular plot point that happened in the latter half of the movie involving a particular character. So if you have not seen the movie, then please do not watch this video. I am going to post a spoiler disclaimer in the title, but in case that you didn't manage to read it, then I'm warning you here. I'm going to dive into some spoilers for Solo, a Star Wars story, in a very kind of morbid and really twisted manner. So please, if you have not seen the film, go and check it out, because what I'm about to describe will actually be much more effective if you have seen the film. So one of the biggest new additions to Solo, a Star Wars story, that was, in my opinion, one of the most riveting ones and one of the most captivating ones, because she was hilarious and she was also very evocative and at the same time also very progressive. She was one of the characters that is kind of maybe a little too hard on the nose, hitting certain social issues that we can kind of take and apply it to modern day times here in real world. And of course, I'm talking about the very proactive and activist, I guess you could say, droid L337, this character right here, who's one of the new droid additions to the Star Wars universe. And when she first popped out on screen, the first droid character that came to mind that would make a very magnificent counterpart to her would be K2SO from Rogue One. They both have the very same exact dry wit, humor, and very deadpan kind of delivery to not only the way that they deliver their humor, but also just the way that they kind of have their outlooks upon humans. And I think that they would just both be the perfect match made in heaven. And I just would have loved to have seen the shared universe between the two of them, especially because they do kind of take place within the same landscape. They both of the stories kind of take place within episodes 3 and 4, so it's like, hey, look, it can kind of maybe sort of be there, but there's still a significant gap there. We're talking 30 or so years. So they take in place in opposite corners of the universe. However, there's a particular connection between these two things that I just wasn't paying attention to until Mike Drucker on Twitter pointed it out. And now that I think about it, yeah, the movie kind of glanced over this, and I don't think that they should. In fact, I would not be surprised if maybe they subtly put it in this film so that maybe it's going to come back full circle in episode 9 when that rolls around. So sadly, L337 becoming the likable character that you would love to see on screen, and you saw her humor, she was winning you over. It was only fate that she was unfortunately going to meet a bitter end. And she did so in doing something that she was kind of set out to do all this time, which is to liberate droids from their human brutal captives. And she was able to do that, and at least do that once more before she bit the dust during that whole onslaught or slash breakout that Han, Lando, and Emilia Clarke's character and all of themselves found themselves on, along with Chewie liberating a handful of Wookiees before finally boarding the Millenium Falcon, which is where L337 perished. But during the Kessel Run, they think to themselves, wait a minute, she has a navigation computer, one of the most advanced ones in the galaxy. Let's hook her up to the ship. And then Lando, after doing so successfully, has that one line that we look at it, we hear, and we kind of just laugh like, that's funny. And then the more you think about it, the deeper it goes down that rabbit hole. That you just think to yourself, what in the hell? Did they really just rope something around really neatly? How far did Lawrence... Granted, this is Lawrence Kasdan. He's a main staple writer with George Lucas and LucasArts, or Lucasfilm, rather. LucasArts is no more. That's the video game division. It would not necessarily be surprising if George Lucas somehow kind of earwormed himself, that sounds gross, into his mindset and managed to kind of plant that in there. L337 gets hooked up to the Millennium Falcon, and Lando says she's part of the ship now. And at first we just thought, okay, it's kind of like a throwaway line, but maybe she is part of the ship. Maybe she now is the ship. And even though she doesn't have a voice, she has her way of kind of communicating with droid beings in some way, shape, or form. Now, if you were to go back to the original trilogy, there's a couple of lines that will now have a completely brand new context to them. You have certain scenes where R2-D2 kind of hooks up to the ship and it looks like he's speaking to the ship with his little bebop boop boop boops. And there's a couple of scenes also where Han Solo, while maneuvering the ship with Chewbacca or while being in the laser shooting, compartment down there that even Tobias Beckett had a hand in here in this film, there's certain lines that, listening to them when you first watched the film, you were just kind of like, okay, he's, personifying the ship. But now it's actually rather literal when he says lines like,
"She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid.
Don't worry. We're all together."
Hey, baby, hold together.
oh shit. Maybe now he's being rather technical with those lines because the ship is alive. She's actually talking in some way, shape, or form. And the reason for why this kind of takes a very dark, and even Mike Drucker pointed it out, Black Mirror-esque type of angle is because this is the type of scenario or outcome that you would expect out of a Black Mirror episode. And if you're not familiar with Black Mirror, think Twilight Zone, only British and much more of a damper. It's much more of those scenarios. There's hardly ever a Black Mirror episode where it ends in a happy ending. Most of the time, those episodes end with such a downer, just kind of like, life sucks and we are heading towards a colossal train wreck. And that's what that show kind of often does with their take on futurism and social commentary about how we are just so tied into technology and how it could ultimately be our undoing. And they kind of take a page from that, whether it was intentional or not, here in Solo, where this character, L337, a activist droid who was trying her best to liberate as many droids as she possibly could from enslavement, ultimately becomes a tool herself. In trying to liberate as many droids as she possibly could, she perished and she became a ship that literally gets handed off from person to person to person through the entire Star Wars legacy. From Lando to Han Solo at the end of this film, where they just better off over a card game, and then later on where she takes a beating through the entire original trilogy, to the point where you think to yourself, there's so many parts and pieces that she got kind of, torn away from that, little sonar dish that gets kind of jacked off when Lando goes down the ship. Once again, certain lines in Return of the Jedi where even Lando says, "Come on, baby, you can do this," or whatever. He's talking to the ship now, and it's kind of eerie. And then we got Force Awakens, where somehow, some way, she ended up in the hands of that junkyard dude played by Simon Pegg, and then finally Rey's able to kind of take her off of Jakku, and then we got Last Jedi with so many more adventures of her going to the galaxy, and it just makes you think about the Millenium Falcon in a whole new different way, that somehow, some way, they're gotta be able to kind of tie that back around to episode 9, where I would not be surprised whatsoever if we have either R2 or some other droid hook up to the machine and they bring back her AI in some way, shape, or form, and she ends up being one of the inclusions in that plot in a way that will probably not be too surprising to me, because I know how storytellers and screenwriters often do to kind of tug at your heartstrings in the way where the one direct way that they could close out this brand new trilogy. I mean, we killed off Luke, we killed off Han. I don't think that would be very tasteful in killing off Leia, knowing that Carrie Fisher unfortunately passed. So what's the next step up from that? Either killing off Chewie or destroying the Millennium Falcon for good. And now personifying the Millennium Falcon this way with L337, especially because of how cathartic her whole arc ended up being, with her trying to save droids and ultimately becoming, and kind of in one shape or form, enslaved herself. That's ultimately the way to go. That's what I'm theorizing could happen, and those are my 2 cents. Where are your guys's? So, after presenting this little theory with a little help of Mike Drucker and a couple of other little tidbits that people were able to kind of post on Facebook and Twitter and responses to those threads, Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about this little new theory? Do you think that Solo should have probably paid much more attention to this little subplot where now they're betting her off? Do you think that maybe this is a little thorough line that they can maybe bring back to episode 9 in some way? I mean, Solo, when it included the dice, that we were all kind of thinking like, what's the dice all about? And here it's almost like they're building their own little cinematic universe, and I would not be surprised since they included the dice here and they kind of gave it some better context and meaning to Han Solo and why it's such an important part in Last Jedi. Do you think that they're maybe going to do the vice versa version of that and have L337 pop out in some shape or form via AI or something in episode 9 and she's going to play a part? I don't know. Could be. Those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comments below. Make sure you like and share this video. And do not forget to subscribe for more videos, some of which could consist of fan theories like these coming very soon. And I don't know if I'm going to make a video about that big reveal at the end of you-know-who from prior Star Wars movies and spin-offs and TV shows, but at the same time I feel like that's kind of a little bit more upfront rather than this subtle one that I just felt the really strong urge to talk about. So I don't know if anybody wants to really hear me talk about you-know-who, but if you do, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys all on the next one. Take care. Some person just made off with somebody's purse and you gotta go catch them, and it's a little bit time sensitive, but at least it gets the urgent feeling of being a superhero where you have to go take care of this random crime because random crime happens and they put it here in this game. And then some fucking kid loses his balloon.
Be good now.
What do we say?
I'll never let my balloony go again.
You were supposed to say thank you, you little shit. God damn it. He just abandoned his child.